to start right away rather. So if you would go over to the P drive for the class, copy over the folder with today's date on it, start up Visual Studio and create a new project named Temps. Give you a couple minutes to do that, and I'll do the same thing. Again, please get into the virtual desktop. Please go over to the P drive for the class. There should be a folder out there under the in-class folder with today's date on it. Copy that folder over to your virtual desktop. Start up Visual Studio and create a new project called Temps. Just an FYI, what you'll see in that folder is another project that we're going to do in just a couple minutes called LoopFun. The comments are in there for the Celsius to Fahrenheit temperature conversion program, which is what we're going to do right now. The code is in there for the exit button also, so that'll make it go a little bit faster. All right. So literally, I'm going to start up in about 30 seconds. We'll actually probably get into talking about the lecture part for Chapter 5 today. We'll see how that goes. The other thing is during the break, I'm going to go upstairs, grab an envelope, and then come back down. And what I would like you to do, if you would, starting today, is next week will end up being lab all week. So a lot of you may not be here, so I would appreciate it if you do course evaluations by the end of this week, which are also out on the P drive. All right, not in the in-class folder. There is a folder out there that's called Syllabus-Course Evaluation. And if you would do those, if you have 2 classes to meet, do 2 of them, etc. All right. All right, so I'm going to, as I asked you to do, I'm going to come in here, start up a brand new project. Same thing I asked you to do. And call it Temps. All right, and the first thing that I want to do now that I'm in this project, all right, and the order in which you do these, of course, doesn't matter, but I'm going to go and bring up my code window right here. And again, one of the things that I asked you to copy in was this. It's called cell defar, and that's the actual comments right out of your book. This is from page 336 in your book. I'm going to grab all that. You've got the same thing if you did what I asked you to do, and I'm going to basically just paste it in right at the top of the program. And then we're going to take a quick look at what's in there. Assuming that C is a Celsius temperature, the following formula converts the temperature to a Fahrenheit temperature. So in other words, that's F for Fahrenheit equals 9/5 times C plus 32. So that's the formula that we're going to use. I came up with a little bit better names because F and C are kind of crummy variable names. So I literally call them pretty much what they are. So I call them Fahrenheit and Celsius. So we are to create an application that displays a table of the Celsius temperatures between 0 and 20 and their Fahrenheit equivalents. The application should use a loop to display the temperatures in a list box. All right? If none of that makes sense to you, then and you don't have to do this, but if you look up on the screen here, the other thing, of course, that you always have out there, or I try to put out there as soon as I can, is the folder that's called homework, and under there are your Chapter 5 executables. There's the Celsius to Fahrenheit table. So this is what we're going to create right now. This is a list box. It's going to have 3 buttons on it. One that says calculate, one that says clear, and one that says exit. The exit one should be pretty obvious to you by now. All right? The calculate one does that. So it's going to list the Celsius temperatures from 0 through 20 and their Fahrenheit equivalents from 0 through 20 on the Celsius side. The clear button does just that. All right? This really and truly shouldn't take that long because there's not a lot of code to the program. All right, so again, just explain the comments to you. So I'm going to go back into the design here, and I notice some of you like to change your color of the form, some of you don't. Either way, it really doesn't matter. But I'm going to change the name of the project here, and I'm going to call it Form Temps. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. Okay. And then I'm going to go over, after I've changed the name, again, it was Form 1, I changed the name to Form Temps. And then I'm going to come down to where the text is, and I'm going to say the same thing pretty much they say in the book. So Chapter 5, Celsius to Fahrenheit table. Okay? And you say, well, that's a little bit too wide. Fine, I'll make that a little wider there. Okay? And it looks like I spelled Fahrenheit wrong, so I'll try to fix that. Okay? And I like to change the color of my form also. You don't want to. It's no biggie. A lot of people are leaving theirs gray, which is just fine. All right? So you may or may not have remembered, but literally as far as what the format looks like here for the program, there were 3 buttons on it. So I'm going to 1, 2, 3 buttons. I'm going to drag those into place. I like my buttons to be silver. Again, some of you do and some of you don't. Really doesn't matter very much. All right. I'm also going to bring a list box and drag that out here. All right. Move that over. So it pretty much lines up with the buttons. I may have to make this a little bigger or, move it around a little bit. I'm not really very worried about it. It'll be fine. All right. So before I go and start adding code, it's kind of time to start naming these. So this is going to be my list box temps. All right, you can see the name right there. My first button here I like to call button calculate. And its text will be calculate. The second one will be button clear, and its text will be clear. And the last one will be button exit, and its text will be exit. Now, I'm hoping that by now there's no questions on any of that. All right, I'm hoping that just makes sense to people. All right, I may have to go and drag this down and make this a little bit bigger. You'll see when we get to that point. I'm not worried about it right now. All right. So I have put in 1, 2, 3, 4 controls, and the form itself is a control. All right. So the first thing that I'm going to do now, after I've done all this, is I'm going to click View, and I'm going to go to Tab Order. And my tab order is now set to 0, 1, 2, 3, and guess what? I like that tab order. So I'm going to leave it the way it is. All right. Again, this is the kind of thing you should be thinking about doing as a programmer. writing a program to make it as simple as possible for the person running your program to understand what it is you're trying to do and make it as easy for them as possible. There will be people who try to use your program that will try to tab their way through just to see what happens. And if you can set up a tab order that makes sense, all right, that's just another way they can run through your program. That's all. All right, I like that tab order, so I'm going to come down to View, and I'm going to click Tab Order again just to remove it. It's fine the way it is. All right, so I have changed the name of my list box. I've changed the name of my Calculate button. I changed the name of my Clear button. I've changed the name of my Exit button. A couple more things, and then I'm ready to add code. Again, these are things I like to do. So I like to single click on my form someplace, go up to the top and find Accept button, and I like to set that to Calculate. All right, so I single clicked on a blank spot on the form, went to Accept button in my Properties window, clicked the down arrow and chose Button Calculate. All right, then I'm going to do the same thing with Cancel, and I'm going to change that one to Button Clear. So I changed those two things. One more thing, again, that I like to do as we're going through this is I like to set my Windows start position, all right, to center screen. All right. Now I'm hoping that I'm not going to have to move anything around. Again, I may have to go and move this down a little, move these down a little. You may or may not have to do this. I don't know if I'm going to have to or not, so I'm just doing it now. What I'm going to want to show in this box right here are 20 temperatures, right there. So I want to make sure that it's big enough and it's wide enough, high enough to show all those. All right, looks like it should be pretty good size right now. So I'm going to highlight everything with a Control A, and I'm going to go over to Locked, and I'm going to lock my controls into place. Again, it's not that you have to do this, just now I don't have to worry about them moving around any place. So far, we've created the interface, we've renamed all of our controls, we set our tab order, we set our accept button and our cancel button, and I reset the text up here on the form. Are there any questions on that? All right, so the next thing I want to do is I want to double click on the exit button, and I want to set the code in for the exit button. This is why, again, I asked you to come in here and copy over that folder, because you have that code for the exit button. All right, if you didn't copy it over, or for whatever reason, you can just put in there this.close if you want to. You can do that. But I copied over all of that code that I've been using thus far. All right, just dropped it into my buttons exit routine. Always nice to come back here and check that. Want to close the form? No. I stay. Want to close the form? Yes. Okay. So that appears to have worked. Okay. So that's the first thing. The next thing I want to do is I want to do my clear button. All right. So I'm going to double click that, and it's pretty simple. It's the name of my list box, .items, .clear. That's it. That's all really that I have to do in there. So the name of your list box, .items, .clear. All right? Just so you know, in your list box right here, so this, what you end up putting in there is known as a collection in C#. So that's a collection of items. That's why we're putting in there the name of the list box, .items. Later we're going to add things to the list box one at a time. So we're going to say listbox temps.items.add. Okay? This literally is going to clear the entire list box in one swoop. Now I can't really test this because I don't have anything in the list box. All right? I could do that if I wanted to. You don't have to do this, but if you look up on the screen here, I can come up here if I want to. And I can say, well, let's just put some garbage stuff in here so I've got something. So where it says items, I can go in and click in here and just put a couple things. A, B, C, D, E. Just so there's some junk in there. I mean, that's stupid, but I can do that. You don't have to do that. But if I run this now, There's my A, B, C, D, E. If I click clear, well, now I know that worked. All right, which is the only reason that I did that. Normally, I wouldn't throw any garbage in there like I just did. All right, so I'm going to get rid of that stuff that's in there. All right, and I'm going to double click on the calculate button because that's the only code that we have to put in there yet. All right, so far we put in all of the code that we've been using thus far for our exit button, which again was that caption, close form now, the message, you want to close it, and our message box, which had the yes, no, and buttons, and had the question mark for the icon. Then we went in and put in the one line of code that we put in for the clear routine, and that's it. All right, so I'm ready to come in here. And now I'm going to come in, and I don't have to do this, but I'm going to set up a constant. Because we're told to do the temperatures from 0 to 20. So I'm just setting that up. As always, I get that green squiggly line, and I get that. Hopefully you remember that by now. I'm getting that green squiggly line because I've created a constant, but I haven't yet used it. All right. In fact, if I put my mouse over it, that's what it tells me. Okay. All right. Now I'm gonna put in double, and that's going to be my Fahrenheit temperature. I'm just going to call it far temp, which isn't a great name, but it'll do. All right, and I want to make sure that my list box is always clear when I start. We're going to go over this the way I just showed you right here. You didn't have to do this, but we're going to go over that in a little bit. I get the same green squigglies there. All right, I get the same green squigglies there under my variable name to tell me the same thing. That I've set it up, but I've got that variable there, but I'm not using it to do anything. Okay, believe it or not, we only have about 5 more lines of code, and the program's done. There really isn't much to this program. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to add something to the list box. So I want to say listbox temps.items.add. And I'm going to put some stuff in here. All right, and it's going to go a little bit wide, so if I have to, I'll make this, you know, I'll put this over 2 lines, but let's see if we can get it all on 1 line. That \T literally means tab. \N gives you a new line, \T gives you a tab. Those are the escape or / characters that you're going to use virtually 99% of the time. There are other ones also. Now, even if you're still typing, don't worry about it, but if you would, please just look on the screen. All right? Because now when I calculate, if this all works, you should see that in the list box. So it should say Celsius temp, tab, Fahrenheit temp, if that worked. And there you see it. I mean, it's not real pretty or anything, and that's fine. Okay? So that's what we put in there so far. And notice now I can check my clear button. Okay? And I can exit. Okay? I'm going to take that line and I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to replace this stuff with just a bunch of equal signs. Okay. Do you have to do that? No. Why did I do that? Look up on the screen again. Okay. Just as little delimiters. Did we have to do that? No. The answer is no. We didn't have to. All right. Now I could sit there and play with it. It looks like there's a couple too many of each. I don't really care. So hopefully what I'm about to say makes sense to everyone. We could have literally come in there and said, we could have created 21 variables. Temp 0, temp 1, temp 2, temp 3, temp 4, all the way up to temp 20. That would have been a really stupid way to do the program, but we could have done it that way, and we could have made it work. All right? What we want to do is we want to write this formula that I told you about. We want to write it once, and that's it. Okay? And, bless you, we wanted to figure out 21 temperatures for us, so we're going to put it in a loop. All right? And when you put it in a loop, there's three kinds of loops that you can use. There is a while loop, there is a do-while loop, and there is a for loop. This program really is a counting program, so I'm going to use the for loop, which is usually typically known as a counting loop. All right? So, literally, all we have to do is put in the loop. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 lines of code left, and 2 of those 5 lines are going to be curly braces. So I'm going to say for cell temp equals 0, cell temp less than or equal to tote temps, and we'll go over all this in just a minute, cell temp plus plus. All right. Now we have to figure out what our Fahrenheit temperature, whoop, I'm sorry, there's a mistake here. How about in cell temp? Like that better? There you go. And I'll put this right back up. Let me make sure I didn't make any mistakes. There it is. Now, if you did come in late, what we did was we went over and copied over the folder with today's date on it over onto our virtual desktop, started up Visual Studio, created a new project called Temps, and we're just plopping the code in. The first code that we put in, we just added our regular button, exit button stuff that we have been doing. Then we had a button here that cleared out our list box, and then we just put in this. Again, you'll notice the whole program is about 70 lines, and that's including, 10 or 12 lines of comments at the top and all the using statements at the top. So the whole program is somewhere in the vicinity of 40 to 45 lines. the things that we're going to be getting to, not in this chapter, but in the next chapter, if everybody, whether you're typing, whether you're done or whatever, could just look up on the screen here for a second. And that is this. And I'm going to show you it today already. But if you notice in here, in our clear button, we're saying listbox.items.clear, which is fine. All right. But we're repeating the same code right here. All right. There is a principle in IT that's called dry. Do not repeat yourself. So the idea is if you can write code where you don't have to repeat yourself, don't do it. So what we're going to end up doing, starting in the next chapter, is we're going to take that code out, that line, put it in its own routine, and then call that routine both from here and from here. And the reason for doing that is if that code ever has to change, you want to be able to only change it in one spot and have it then recompile the program and have it be reflected all over the place in your program. Now, again, if that doesn't make sense, I mean, I could be a real hard ass and say, well, the reason you're doing it is if you don't, I'm going to take off. But that is the way that people code. All right? Because as of right now, when we've been writing routines, everything that we've been doing, we've been putting in click events. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. But quite often you want to call the same code from more than one place. So it does make sense to put that stuff into what's called its own module. And we'll talk about subs and we'll talk about functions, but that won't be for a bit. All right. Now let's quickly go over this. Hopefully by now that line makes sense. That's just a constant. That'll be the total number of temperatures that we have. All right. There's our Fahrenheit temperature. So that's what we're doing in here. Here again, we're telling it to clear the list box. Here we're creating our headings. So I mean, if I really want to, I can put, clear list box, create list box headings. I mean, some of this stuff I think is pretty self-evident when you're looking at it. But if you want to put that in, great. And if you don't, that's also okay. All right. What I want you to understand, though, is what's in here. The first thing to realize is we're telling what happens in here, we're telling it to happen 21 times. All right, because we're telling it to start at 0 and go till 20. All right, you'll notice if I change this, for example, to 9. I don't want you to do that, but if I change this to 9 and save it and run the program again, you can see the difference. That should be pretty self-evident, just taking a look at it. We want it to be 0. That variable that I'm calling cell temp in there is what's called a loop control variable. It's the variable that controls the loop. In fact, a lot of times what you're going to find when you see my programs is I call that thing LCV for that reason, loop control variable, calling it what it is. Here, I'm calling it cell temp because I'm using it in the formula. And I thought that made it a little bit more self-documenting to put it in there like this. All right. So var temp is the Fahrenheit temperature that we are calculating by taking 9/5, multiplying it by cell temp, and adding 32 to it. Before anybody asks, I mean, there's a lot of ways this can be done. For instance, oops. If you didn't want to do it like that, most people are smart enough to know that 9 divided by 5 is 1.8. That would have worked also. It's not a problem. So if you'd rather do it like that, you can. Most often you see it in books put like this. That's why I used it like this, because that's what the authors show. But you'll notice if I leave it like this and run the program again, I should get the exact same output, and I do. Yes. Yes. That could have been declared inside. Yes, it could have. Yes. Okay, the question was, since I defined that variable in here, and I defined that variable outside of here, which one is preferable? Well, normally, with loop control variables like this, normally you define those in the loop. And what it is really that's only known, its scope is in that loop. If I try, notice if I come down here and I say something like cell temp equals 8. I'm getting that error because cell temp is only known within these curly braces. So normally the way I do it, and it's typically that's the way that most people recommend, is your loop control variable, you define that in there. But there's at least a chance I may want to, at some time or other, use my Fahrenheit temperature. I may want to use that outside of the loop, and that's why I defined it outside of the loop. All right? I mean, it's a good question, and you probably won't get any standard answer. The big thing is, if you're going to do that, try to be consistent with the way you do it. That's all. Come back just because I want to have what the author had. Now, what this says is I want to add what I'm about to put in here, what's in these inside of these parentheses. I want to add that to the list box. So first give me a tab, then give me my Celsius temperature. Remember, that's an integer, so I'm converting it to a string. Will it work if I don't convert it to a string? Normally it will. So you know, normally it will. But it doesn't in all languages. That's why I'm trying to teach you what I consider to be better programming habits from the get-go. All right? So we're converting that to a string. Then we're adding 3 more tabs just so it lines up a little nicer. Then we're taking that Fahrenheit temperature that we just figured out, and we're converting that to a string, and we're telling it to give it 2 decimal places. Again, did we have to do that? No. If I didn't give it 2 decimal places, I would just have just raw numbers there. So in other words, with what you see right there, all right, it would have been just 32, etc. All right. So this is a simple program, but when you start to see some of the power of it, it's gonna go off the screen, but just so you see this. Notice if I change that, for example, to 100. All right, so I changed that temps. I changed it to 100. All right, and I save it and run the program. And I click calculate. Well, it's not going to all show on here, but notice it's now, all I had to do was make a change. I'm not going to do this, but I could put 1,000 in there. I could put 1,000,000 in there. I'm not going to do it because with 1,000,000 it would take too long to go through. All right, but you get the idea. The reason that you use loops is they will almost always make your life easier. What we'll learn in later chapters when we go through other types of collections like arrays is things like arrays are meant to be used with things like loops. All right. Any questions on any of that stuff in the program? So again, yours should look like this when you run it out. If you don't like the way that I lined it up, it's not beautiful, but it's functional. There are ways that you can go in there and play with this stuff so you can make it all right justified, so the 0 would end up with that 0, etc. If you want to go through that trouble to do that, go ahead. Like I said, I don't think it's great here, but I think it's functional and it looks fine. You could do that too, yeah. Yeah, the question was, I mean, yeah, we could have come in there and literally we could have made that a double. All right, and I don't think we even have to change anything else. All right. Well, when I print it out, I'd have to change that also, I guess, right? There are ways this could be refined. The program itself, just so you know this, the program, it's a putsy program. It's not really very important. What's important is that you start using loops and you understand the concept of using loops. That's what's important. All right. All right. right, that said, we can put this program away, so to speak. So you save this program, and then what I'd like you to do is the other thing that's in there is there's a program that's called LoopOnCopy in the folder that I just had you copy over. If you could open that up. I've already written the interface for you, and not because I'm a terrific guy, but there's 9 buttons in it, and I just wanted to put those out there. All right, so all that stuff is out there. So you can bring that program up if you would, because we're going to start looking at how we fill in, because I took out the code. I've already created it with the code, and I took the code out so we can put it in here together. This one you don't have to turn in, so if it's easier for you to just watch and not type stuff in, then do that. It's okay. But when you look at this, notice what I'm trying to show you here, if you would. All 3 of the major loops, the while loop, the DoWhile loop, and the for loop. All right? Then a couple statements that you oftentimes use with loops, and those are the continue statement and the break statement. All right? Our old friends, the exit button and the clear button. Okay? Working with the loop control variable, and if we wanted to give program info. That's kind of a stupid thing to put in there, but I wanted 9 buttons, so it looked kind of nice, because it looked kind of bad with 8. All right? So I'm going to start giving you the code so we can go through. And the idea is pretty simple. It really is. What we want to print out in here, if you look up on the screen here, for these 3 buttons here, we should get these done by the time we break. But I want this to say something like printing out the numbers 1 to 10 with a while loop, and then printing out the numbers of 1 to 10, and then adding the total, which is 55. And then we'll do the same thing, but we'll do it with a DoWhile. Then we'll do the same thing, but we'll do it with a for loop. Does that make sense? All right, so that's the idea. And again, what you're going to see once we start looking at this is with some of the stuff that's in here, I'm going to have you write different routines, because we'll want to call, for instance, the clear routine. You may or may not realize this, but let's suppose I put the code in here. That gives me the numbers from 1 to 10. So I click the button, it says x equal 1, x equal 2, x equal 3, all the way to 10. The total of the 10 numbers is 55. Boom, everything's cool. Now I put the thing in there for the DoWhile, and I click it again. Well, if I don't tell it to clear, it just keeps appending everything onto it. And it'll keep going, and it'll keep going, and it'll keep going. So one thing I want to do is every time I click one of these buttons, the first, especially these 3, one of the first things I want to happen is I want the Listbox to clear. So I'm going to write a routine called, clear Listbox. And that's only going to have that one line in it, so I can call it from all over the place. Very similar to what I just mentioned to you. All right. Again, just because I like to get it out of the way, I'm going to come back, just as I told you before, and grab that exit button code. I'm going to throw that in there first, just so I've got that in there. And I guess I got it in there already anyway. Must have left it in there for you. Good. So that works. Okay? So you've got that in there now. Now the order in which you put in these buttons does not matter. All right? And I have noticed too, now if you look in here, everybody would look up on the screen here, if I right mouse click and choose view code, the only thing that's in there right now, as far as what I put in, that's got code in it, is the button exit. You've got all the rest of the things in there, but there's nothing in any of them. Okay? Now, Microsoft, for lack of better words, is getting better about this, but usually, like if I double click right here, now notice what it did. It brought up form loop fun underscore load. It brings up the load event for this. Geez, I didn't really want that. All right? So I'm going to remove it. Now, there's no guarantee that if you bring up something like that and you remove it, that you're not going to get an error when you run your program. All right? And Visual Basic doesn't do that. Visual Basic, you can go and make changes, you can remove stuff, but C# is a lot more restrictive in what you can or can't do. So sometimes when that happens, I just leave it in there if I put the wrong thing in there. I just leave it in. It's not really going to hurt anything. All right? But let's talk about, so the first thing we want to do is, just because I'm going to do them in order, is this while loop. Now I showed you the for loop, and the while loop really won't look that different. Okay? But the first thing I'm going to want to do, I mean, think about this. I already mentioned this to you. The first thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to clear the list box. All right? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call a routine that I haven't written yet. That's called clear the list box. All right? And I'm not getting any errors. And the reason I'm not getting any errors is I think I put it in here already. There it is. That's the first time I've shown you a routine that we have written. All right? Somebody tell me. There's one line of code we put in there. What is it? Listbox numbers dot items dot clear. That's it. So I now can call that from anywhere I want to call that. All right? And we'll get into this in later chapters, but private right here, private means that that's only available from inside of the class in which I'm using it. It can't be called from outside of the class from another class. It is private to this class. What you'll notice when we get into this stuff, way near the end of the semester, is there are 3 different access modes. There's private, which I just mentioned to you. There's public, which means it's available to all. And there's something that's sort of in between there that's called protected. We'll get into all that stuff later on in the semester. All right? So now I can come in, and for my while loop, now I can come in and I can tell it the first thing I want it to do is call clear the list box, and it's going to do that for me. That's good. That's a good start. And then I thought, well, you know, it would be kind of nice to put at least a comment or 2 in here, just because of the fact that if somebody's reading this program, so they have some kind of an idea of, you know, the fact that I sort of have an idea of what I'm doing here. So I said print out the numbers 1 through 10 via a while loop. Also, add to the accumulator. All right, if you don't know what that is, you're going to see it in just a minute. So I'm going to put in about, the whole program, the whole routine is about 6 lines of code. So I'm going to put all 6 lines in, then we'll come back and talk about them. Now I'll come right back to it. Let me make sure I didn't screw anything up. All right, while. Current value, boom, sum of the numbers is, I can already tell I made a mistake. See that? I'm leaving out the last one. So there's a mistake in there. Good. That's fine. We'll fix it in just a minute. And notice now when I call clear, doesn't look good, does it? So 2 things look like they got to be fixed. All right? Well, that should be less than or equal to. That's a big thing. Clear the list box. That's 55, so that's correct. It brought 10 back, so that's good. And the clear still doesn't work, so I'll have to fix that. All right. Now, if I want to, I can come in here before I put in all this stuff, and I could put a little heading in here, which probably would have been a nice idea. So, for instance, I could have come in here and said listbox numbers dot items dot add printing 1 to 10 via while loop. Same thing I put in the comment. Something like that. Probably should have put that into the code. So again, let me make sure I didn't screw anything up. All right. So again, if I want to, I can do this and then put in my kind of what I showed you before. Put in a bunch of equal signs or whatever. Okay. That's looking fine. Like I said, we'll have to figure out what the clear problem is, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. What I'm more concerned with is that you understand what's going on in this routine. So the first thing we're attempting to do right here is to clear the list box. Again, it's not working. We'll figure out why in just a second. Then we're putting those headings at the top, printing 1 through 10 via a while loop, all right? This is another loop right here. Probably the hardest part, 2 lines of this program so far for you to understand are this one and this one. All right? Now I'm going to do the easier one first. This right here, this is equivalent to tote equals tote plus LCV. Does that make that easier to understand? But that's a programmer's, it's a way of you writing a little bit less code. This line here is a little bit harder to understand. Most programming languages, including C#, Java, JavaScript, all right, so a lot of you have already heard this shtick already, but plus adds 1 to a variable. All right? The variable LCV started out at the top of the program being equal to 0. See that? It's equal to 0. So what I'm telling it to do is before you do anything, add 1 to it, which means it's now 1. Okay? Then check to make sure, is it less than or equal to my ending value, which we set at the top of the program as 10. I want to go back to the question Micah asked before about where you define stuff, because this will be the last chapter where we define stuff up here. Starting in the next chapter, you're going to define something where you need it, and only where you need it, and if you need it in another routine, you're going to pass it back and forth, because that's the way that programmers do things. All right? So what this is saying right here is add 1 to the current value of my loop control variable, and once you add 1 to it, check to see whether or not it's less than or equal to 10. If it is, write its current value and add its current value to our accumulator. Eventually, you're going to add 1 to it, and it's going to be, LCV is going to be equal to 11. 11 is not less than or equal to 10, so we'll fall out of the loop. We'll add a blank line. We'll add sum of numbers 1 to 10 is. If I wanted that to look a little nicer, I guess I could have put a tab in there. All right. This is literally, I just wanted to put a blank line in there so it would look a little bit better. All right. It's not beautiful, but it's functional. That's what I'm looking for right now. All right. And the good news is if you take a look up on the screen here, I'm going to grab everything that I put in here, everything under this while, under right here. The entire thing, everything except for the curly braces here and here. I'm going to grab everything else. I'm going to copy it to the clipboard, and I'm going to paste it in there for my DoWhile, because there's very few changes I'm going to have to make. Now, instead of through a while loop, I'm going to say through a DoWhile loop. That's a change. All right. When you use a DoWhile loop, you don't put the thing you're checking at the beginning. You put it at the end, and you put a semicolon after it. And instead of saying less than or equal to, I'm going to change this around a little bit. All right. Now, before we do anything, let's make sure I didn't break it. I'll come right back to it. So here it is, 1 to 10 with my while loop. All right. Current value is 12. Well, there's some screwed up stuff, so I'm going to have to fix that. Okay? And I can already tell you what the screwed up stuff is. I called the first one in my while loop up here. Then I called the second one, and guess what? I didn't change that value of LCV. So once it came out, it was now 12. Why is it 12? Well, it was 11 because that made it fall out of this loop up here, and the first thing I'm doing is adding 1 to it. So there's a lot of ways to fix it, but I'm going to fix it the cheesy way to begin with. I'm just going to say right here, LCV equals 0. That's all I'm going to do. Run the program again. The while works. Now whoa. And I'm also going to have to take my total and set that back equal to 0. Okay? So not only do I want to say LCV equals 0, I want to say tot equals 0. So run it one more time. The while works. Now the DoWhile works. You can't even see it. It happens so fast that the screen redraws itself. All right? Now there's something goofed up in there. Good. That's all fine. We'll fix that in just a bit. All right? What I wanted to show you, though, see how much of this I can put up on the screen at once, is with the while loop is called a pretest loop. In other words, when we came in here, we're checking this before we go into the loop. If this is false to begin with, so if we'd have come in here and if we'd have said this, yeah, okay. So if we'd have come in at the beginning and said this, LCV equals 100. I think you'd all agree that 100 is not less than or equal to 10, right? So I should never go into this loop now. And you'll notice I don't. It's acting the exact way I want it to act. All right. And also one of the things that tells me is, man, I don't want to go in there and have to do stuff like this. That's a hack. To put things like LCV equals 0 and tot equals 0, to put them in there, that's a hack. And whether you realize that or not, and if you don't, maybe you do now, where that actually belongs is in here, in our routine that's called clear the list box. So we should be clearing the list box, and we should be resetting those variables. Why? Because we're doing it in one place. That's why. That looks fine. And now that looks fine. I should be able to keep bouncing back and forth. Okay? And the last thing I'll show you, and then we're going to take a break. You've already seen something similar to this. And you should be able to write this based off of the last program that we just looked at. I should be able to come in here now, grab all this code again, and I want to put it into my for loop. So what's going to change? Well, that's not going to change, but I want to say this via for loop. All right, and instead of, again, having that be in there via a while loop, I'll want to do it via a for loop. So just like we looked at before, for else int LCV equals, in fact, we already have an LCV, so I don't need to say int. LCV equals 0. LCV less than or equal to end val. LCV plus plus. And those are all the changes I've made. So let's check that one out. The while loop didn't break anything. The do while didn't break anything. There's the for loop. So you saw by just making very minor changes how we were able to do the same thing using 3 different loops. Now I'll leave that up here, all right, as much as I can, because I can't show all of it at once. But I'll go back to where we had this, the while, and I'll put that up there. I'm going to run upstairs and grab that envelope so you can do course evaluations, all right. And I'm going to bring that down. When I come down, then I'll move this down, so I'll show you the do while loop, and then right before we get back. So let's come back at 9:15. Should give you plenty of time. All right, and we'll take a look at that. All right, I'm going to stop this just for a second because I want to stop taping.